Do you ever feel like you're too much? Have you ever been told it by friends or family? Told that you're not normal because you can't get over a breakup? And does rejection-sensitive dysphoria feel like a literal stab to the chest? Well, if that's the case, this episode is for you.
I just wouldn't give myself a break at all. I really struggled to take time off. But that was definitely like connecting ADHD burnout to self-worth. I'm not worthy of taking time off. And I think we always feel like we're on the back foot as an ADHDer anyways. These kind of tendencies, can really create burnout.
So many of us work really, really hard because we don't think we're good enough. We're trying to prove someone that we are. We overwork ourselves, probably more so than a neurotypical person, because we feel like we've got something to prove.
Yeah.
Amie tells us about her journey with ADHD, how some very risky behaviour can manufacture a dopamine rush, why setting boundaries is vital to becoming a successful entrepreneur, and why people with ADHD make the best entrepreneurs. If someone puts a full stop on the text message, then you just think they hate you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful.
So, or the dreaded okay.
Oh my God.
Or just K.
The K, don't K, no.
Yeah.
And one kiss.
Never see them again.
I'm like, why one kiss? Just send two like a normal human being, or none at all.
Oh, and we find out why an oat biscuit is Amie's ADHD item. Do you have a structure that you've created which you think will improve the productivity of our ADHD listeners?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. So there is something that I picked up from a book that I read, and I can't remember the author now, called The Rocks and the Pebbles Analogy. And I found this really, really practical in my days, because you often find that you've got, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you've got big projects that you like to work on or you aspire to have in your business. And then you obviously have the pebbles, which are the daily tasks that drive the business forwards. And I often find that you can either get caught on one or the other. So if you create like a structure where the rock is like the main focus of the day, and then the pebbles are around that structure, then that tends to make sure that you're sort of holding yourself accountable to get these projects that, because you know what we're like serial starters of things. I want to start a podcast, I want to do this. But then actually making sure you put it into motion, I feel like you have to make sure that it's in your diary and scheduled for that.
Where does wellness come into this plan for productivity?
The wellness comes into it from a term that a lot of people may find is a bit woo-woo, called regulating your nervous system. The reason why I say that is because I used to have a therapist that used to say to me all the time, Amie, self-care is such a big thing with ADHD. I don't know, when somebody says something like that, I don't know whether it's my brain, I need quite a literal example of that. So I used to think, like, if I'm going to be a successful businesswoman, I don't need self-care kind of thing. But the wellness side of it sort of emulates that, where the more calm and relaxed you are and the more that you look after yourself, you're able to actually facilitate doing more in your day.
If you were to just describe how you look after yourself and how you maintain your wellness, what's an example of something you do?
It's the classic ADHD thing. I have a morning routine that I do, and if something happens in that morning routine and I can't do that morning routine, I'll have a meltdown. I'll be like, no, I can't deal. But definitely for me, I've really started to focus on my journaling, waking up in the morning straight away before my brain's even come to fruition, instead of grabbing for my phone and going on Instagram, writing in my journal.
It's such good advice. I saw an analogy where someone said, talking about why you shouldn't look at your phone first thing in the morning, you wouldn't let 1,000 people into your bedroom first thing in the morning. So why are you letting 1,000 people into your mind by looking at your phone straight away?
That's such a great... See, this is why I like neurodivergence, because that analogy just sat really well with me. I definitely agree. I think that it's hard. It does take a lot of willpower, because for me, I definitely find that when I go to chase for dopamine, I don't like the feature on Instagram that pops up with all the likes. That for me is it gives me sort of gambling vibes.
Yeah, great advice. It just keeps that comparison as well at bay. I don't think it's healthy to look at your phone immediately and to see other people, your competition, see what they're doing, because instantly that's going to ignite that part of your brain that compares. You're going to use up so much energy on negative feelings and envy, comparison, when actually that could be directed at your purpose.
Comparison, especially as an entrepreneur, has to be something you have to control, because you can easily go on Instagram, and I feel like especially with that platform, you can see people's lives with the stories and a lot of that. So it does kind of develop this toxic comparison. So you do have to be very careful what you consume.
Why do you think ADHD entrepreneurs suffer from burnout?
I'll give you an example of where I was last year. So pretty much like all of my life, I have kind of been in a mentality that to be successful, I need to struggle. Obviously, if you do have, hyperactive tendencies with ADHD as well, a lot of people can be quite highly strung, very erratic. So you can easily channel that sort of way of being into your business. And I think with hyperfocus as well, you can really get invested in that and push past that point. And then that's when the burnout gets created, because like if I was to look at myself last year, I just wouldn't give myself a break at all. I really struggled to take time off, but that was definitely like connecting ADHD burnout to self-worth. I'm not worthy of taking time off. And I think then that loops into the whole, we always feel like we're on the back foot as an ADHDer anyways. We're always overcompensating for that. And then I think these kind of tendencies, can really create burnout.
So many of us work really, really hard because we don't think we're good enough. We're trying to prove someone that we are. So we overwork ourselves, probably more so than a neurotypical person, because we feel like we've got something to prove.
Yeah.
Are there any other tips you have that might help someone with ADHD overcome burnout?
Yeah, definitely. So I think boundary setting is a huge one. Not the easiest thing to do. I'm not great at it now, but and this is something, I think all of these things, they're not things that come naturally. As humans, we don't like putting boundaries in place, especially if you have people-pleasing tendencies. So I think that you do have to kind of put yourself in discomfort to reap the rewards from boundaries. So I think that's a really good one. If you are in a service-based industry with clients, then definitely trying to, stretch the time that you respond, or, giving yourself a bit of a window there where you're like, I'm not responding outside of these hours. Sleep as well. So I used to sort of look at, because you can get into this like hustle culture, toxic mentality. I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of vibe. And it's like, absolutely not. Like sleep is something that you need to enhance your performance. So I think that that's something that has enabled me to avoid burnout. And I know that when I don't have good sleep, I feel way more dysregulated. And then I think the last one for me is definitely, it's going to sound quite woo-woo again, but doing things that like connect to my inner child. So, doing things that give me like joy and fulfillment, that I can literally just be a kid and I don't have to think about being a responsible adult. And I think that gives me fulfillment. And then that helps me to not feel like I'm just constantly on this like hamster wheel.
I don't think that sounds woo-woo at all. I think, in fact, a lot of people with ADHD and just generally, we are very childlike sometimes in a lot of areas. And actually it's that masking and not admitting that, and just trying to put ourselves in situations and use methods of strategy to organize ourselves that we think adults should be doing. That's where we fall down, because we don't embrace that inner child and do things that actually that inner child is screaming out for. Consistency. Do you think ADHD people struggle with that?
Oh my God, yes. 100% yes. I think consistency is really hard for somebody with ADHD. I think a lot of people struggle with consistency though in society. I find that, some people will start projects and not finish them because, they'll have lack of confidence to get them over that hurdle. So I think consistency ties into self-esteem as well.
Are there any tips you have on how people could improve their consistency?
Taking the pressure off yourself. It's like with a fitness routine, for instance, right? So many people they go to the gym, they start doing, a gym program. After a couple of weeks, they drop off. But that's because the expectation that they've got is that it's going to give them this big, I don't know what we think. We go into the gym, we think it's going to change our lives, right? But you don't get the best results from just going once and then it giving you that big boost and then that's that. So I think that to anybody that is listening and they have ADHD, if you can create consistency through low dopamine rituals and tasks, then you will start to get fulfillment in other areas, and then you'll start to find the enjoyment in it, and then that will create the consistency moving forwards. And I also think that, it goes back to the rocks and pebbles analogy, making sure that you've got it in your weekly routine, your daily routine, so that you don't, because I think sometimes we forget, and that's a big issue for us with our brains, so it needs to be actioned in order to create that consistency. And you can build it up over time. It doesn't have to be a full thing to start with, just start small, and then, over the weeks and months, that's when it gets more consistent and you find the enjoyment in building on that then.
That's great. And that probably explains why my many attempts at being consistent in a gym membership haven't worked.
Maybe we need to go with a different analogy.
Where do you think people with ADHD are going wrong in their quest to be more consistent?
I think that they're going into things too hard, too soon. And like we spoke about earlier, with projects and starting things like, oh my God, going all in with this, loving it. And then all of a sudden it just sort of dwindles and you're just like, oh, I can't be asked for this anymore. It doesn't give me the same feeling.
Do you think you've cracked the code for ADHDers to be more consistent?
It depends on where we're looking for that consistency. Some areas, yes. Some areas, no. I have so many things that I definitely still have barriers around. But I find that I often understand that when I've got a barrier around something that I'm trying to be consistent with, it's because my subconscious is telling me something and telling me not to do it. So if I can clear that and do the inner work to understand why that blocks in the way, it normally comes down to me having a self-esteem issue that it's going to fail and I'm not going to be good enough. So there's like 10 things that are telling me not to be consistent, or I'm overcomplicating the process, or I don't understand step by step what needs to happen each time for me to be consistent.
Do you think there's a relationship between consistency and perfectionism? And do you think perfectionism is getting in the way of ADHDers reaching their goals?
So much. It comes down to then perfectionism linking with procrastination. It's that chicken and egg situation. It can be as perfect as you want, but if you're not actioning it, then what's the point? You could have so much software, you could have all of the bells and whistles, but if you can't actually put one step in front of the other, then, you're never going to get so far.
I'll just reflect, and I wonder if it's anything to do with our low self-esteem seems to be very common with ADHDers, and is that linked to the many negative messages we've had throughout our lives? Negative messages, corrective messages, us not feeling good enough. So therefore we feel that everything we do has to be an extreme counter to that, and therefore has to be perfect. Because anything less than perfect is only going to be reinforcing those messages and that narrative that we've built into ourselves.
It goes back to that same thing of your upbringing has a big impact on that. And, there's a lot of trauma created with, certain things that are told in school, certain things that are told growing up. And, like we said, your self-esteem gets knocked and that carries with you to adulthood then. And I think, especially for a lot of ADHD females, and I think you've done a few posts on this, Alex, before about, being told that you're gifted as a child and as a female, ADHD female, and there's a lot of pressure put on somebody, and then especially somebody that masks, because then they feel like they have to keep this appearance up for the whole time. And then I think, like you said, anything less than that is not deemed as worthy. But then when you start to understand that it's actually not deemed as worthy to nobody else but you, and you're like, nobody else really cares as much as you do about it. And I think that really helped me to take that pressure off a little bit too.
What's your relationship like with masking?
Oh, I masked my whole life.
What's the difference between behind the scenes Amie when you're in a safe environment at home with your partner and public facing Amie?
I think growing up, I was always a very bubbly person, and I still am like that now, and I enjoy being like that. But I think then, people copped onto that, and then it was sort of, oh, Amie's the overachiever, Amie's this, Amie's that. And then that sort of built in this image and conquest for me to create this person. And then that led me to sort of, move to London, try and pursue a performance career in the West End, do lots of different things. And it was still sort of the version of me that was almost just being a very hyperactive person. And to the point where I remember I moved into a house with a few girls when I first moved to London. It's going back like 9 years ago now. And they used to say to me all the time, oh my gosh, you're like just so much, and you always interrupt us, and all of these kind of things. I didn't realize at the time that was because of my ADHD. So I'd say, yeah, that's what sort of masking Amie looks like. And then Amie behind closed doors, it's actually really calm, really chill. I'm actually more of an introvert than I realised. I like my own company. I get very tired very easily when I over socialize with people. I got to a point last year where I was in a bit of a scary place with burnout, to the point where we moved out of London. I think that I definitely took the extreme measures of doing what I could to create a life for myself that enabled me to be more authentically me. So yeah, and I still enjoy being bubbly and still enjoy being outgoing, but on my terms now.
That journey that you've been on with awareness, and what has that taught you about mistakes that you might have made or misunderstandings that there might have been in previous romantic relationships?
That rejection sensitivity is something that I now understand wasn't... I used to blame myself a lot. And in my relationships, like especially when I went through breakups growing up, I'd be an absolute mess, to the point where, and I know we all go through heartbreak when we're younger, and I remember my parents actually saying to me, which is another story, but sort of turning around and saying, you know, Amie, what's wrong with you? Like, this isn't normal. And I just couldn't regulate my emotions. So I think, you know, romantically in relationships, it taught me that also the people that I had romantic relationships with weren't bringing out the authentic side of me and making me feel safe. But then there was also the other side of it where I was, you know, carrying a lot of trauma, and there was a lot of things in the relationships that enabled me to act very impulsively.
You mentioned RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It appears very differently in everyone. How would you describe it if someone asks you to explain the feeling?
It can literally feel like somebody is stabbing you in the chest, and it goes back to that inner child. You're in a child. It's like, oh my God, like this is horrible. Like, why is this person being mean to me? But they're projecting something that they haven't addressed themselves. But you just take that so personally that it can literally crush you. And that's how I can describe it. And then in other scenarios as well, I definitely find that it depends on where I'm at, especially if I'm feeling more burnt out. My RSD will come through quite strong, and with hormones as well, where I feel like people hate me, and I take what people say quite wrongly. And my partner is very good at supporting me with this, because I sometimes take text messages the wrong way.
If someone puts a full stop on the text message, then you just think they hate you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. So,
or the dreaded okay.
Oh my gosh.
Or just K.
The K, don't K, no.
Yeah.
And one kiss.
Never see them again.
I'm like, why one kiss? Just send two like a normal human being, or none at all. Like.
And this newfound knowledge of ADHD, that's led to a successful relationship now?
Yeah, I feel like our relationship is good because he's very patient with me. And there's been so many times where I've worried about judgments, and there's never been anything that's off the cards. I've just been allowed to be authentically myself, and he supports. He's a very aware person as well, because he's also in the self-development space, and I think that helps because he wanted to research how to sort of support me with ADHD.
If you're going into a new relationship, what do you think the other person, the non-ADHD partner, what do you think is the most important thing for that person to understand about ADHD?
I would say that you need to understand that they need a lot of reassurance. They will often do things as a reflection of, you know, impulsivity and just how they've been treated their whole entire lives. They will often try and self-sabotage relationships. So I think if the other person can kind of understand not to take it personally, like the amount of times Jack goes to me, Amie, it's not you, it's your ADHD. And that really helps me to kind of not shame myself. Have as much patience as you can, but also make sure that you protect yourself as well. Like, my partner sees a therapist, you know, he makes sure that he is supported and he has his support network as well, because you are dealing with somebody that can be very unpredictable, that can be very up and down with their emotions, and that can take its toll on the person in the relationship as well.
Love languages is an interesting topic in relationships. Do you associate with a love language?
Definitely, and I think it's often quite challenging when you're in a relationship and you have a different love language to your partner, because your partner's not necessarily going to see the value in doing the thing that gives you the most validation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, total.
So for me, having verses in cards is something that I'm very big on.
Versus in cards.
Yeah, so like a birthday card or
Right.
a Valentine's card or something. Don't know why, don't ask me why, but I love a soppy verse in a card. And if somebody can write me a poem and those kind of things. And my partner is such a great person when it comes to acts of service, which is another love language of mine, because I think you can have a few. His version of saying I love you is very different to my version, and that can sometimes upset me. But I've learnt that just because his version is different, that's not necessarily wrong.
What does his version look like?
So we're actually still exploring that, which is really interesting, because I feel like as like some males, I've asked him on so many occasions, I'm like, you need to let me know what your needs are. And this is something we're still pondering over, because he's an easily pleased guy. He's very, he's just very humble, like, grew up on a farm in Devon, really chilled. So for him to actually have to be like, these are my needs, then, it's quite challenging. But I think for him, he really values quality time. That was something I struggled with last year, and it goes back to the whole, burnout and overworking. I really struggled to be in the present, and my brain was always on work, and I was so scared to let go of that. So I've had to learn, for the sake of, myself and my relationship, that quality time together is really important to him.
I think it's so important to have a healthy, content relationship, especially if you're an entrepreneur. Because if there's an issue with your personal love life, then I imagine that's going to significantly affect your ability to focus on your business. Another area I think is really important, as well as your romantic life, is probably your nutrition and your diet. Supplements. Do you take ADHD supplements?
So yeah, I take ADHD supplements. Don't take medication. But yeah, I take lion's mane, reishi mushroom. There's a supplement actually, hopefully these guys may listen to this at some point, called Get Dopa, which is like a nootropic supplement. Matt, the guy that runs the company, he's great. So I take those three, and then I also take vitamin D, omega-3, so quite a wide range of supplements, and magnesium too.
Any foods that make your ADHD traits worse?
Definitely. So all my life, I didn't realise I had celiac disease. It was, again, my partner Jack has really brought out a lot of these sort of things. And he was, because I said to him, I was like, I always need an afternoon nap. He was like, Amie, obviously it is normal for us to sort of need those respite periods, but he was like, it's not really, you shouldn't really be having afternoon naps, like need them. And it was all to do with my nutrition, and just, there is a link, and this is beyond my scientific knowledge, but a good friend of mine, Sarah, she's a great nutritionist, and she will tell you about the link between ADHD and intolerances, and finding out about that and just clearing the gluten from my diet actually gave me less brain fog, and it gave me a clearer sort of headspace to be able to focus. And I genuinely feel like if you can eliminate brain fog out of the mix when you've got ADHD, it's such a game changer. So that really helped. And then caffeine as well. I don't drink energy drinks. I have 1 or 2 maximum caffeinated drinks a day before 1 o'clock.
Are there any foods that you found help your ADHD?
I'm very simple when it comes to nutrition. High protein diet, getting in good fats, good proteins in your diet is going to help with your omega-3 intake, going to stimulate your cognitive function. Protein intake, we know that that's something that should be, a priority in our diet as well. And also carbs that are not too heavy, that cause like a bit of a crash. So, I tend to sort of eat rice and those kind of carbs instead. I
always found when I ate carbs, my brain fog just went like through the roof.
Really?
I don't eat carbs now before dinner, because if I'm sat at my computer trying to focus on something, it's good. But then if I have like a heavy pasta lunch, then my ability to think just disappears. And I always wondered why that was. And I've heard lots of people now say that carbs, I think someone told me because your energy goes from your brain to your stomach to digest, because carbs are very heavy and quite digestive intensive. So your body is literally diverting energy away from your cognitive system to your digestive system.
It does sort of play a part when you've got something in your stomach that's creating a sluggish feeling. That is going to, connect with your brain, and you are just going to feel like wanting to nap. So I think foods that are easily digestible can really help.
That leads us nicely on to the ADHD item. I ask every single guest to tell me an item that most represents ADHD in their life. And you've said, I'll pass these to you, Nairn's oat biscuit breaks.
Nans, if you're watching this, you've got great biscuits.
You want to sponsor the show?
Yes, that would be great. Yes. So the one thing I do always say to any of my clients that have ADHD is snacks shouldn't be shamed. Snacks are great. Obviously, varied snacks. We don't want to be eating mini eggs every day, even though they're great.
Damn.
I know, damn it. What's it about egg covered chocolate, or chocolate covered eggs anyways. Yeah. But yeah, the oat biscuits, I absolutely love these. And this is definitely when Alex asked me about an item that I can't live without. This was probably it, because there's 4 biscuits in a packet. And I feel like if I'm on the go throughout the day, as long as I have a pack of these in my bag, I'm good to go. It's like an emergency snack.
The danger is because the items always go onto the shelves behind us. So we might need to replace these every week now. I think I'm going to eat them.
Yeah, unless you guys eat them and we can just pop the box there, or it's just an excuse to have them every week.
I'll put that on the table if you like, to get out of the way. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I tend to, because something I do every morning, it's like a ritual, is I go for a morning coffee walk with my other half before the day starts. And I obviously know the health risks sometimes about all the time about drinking coffee on an empty stomach. So they go in my pocket first thing in the morning.
Fantastic. I'm going to try that. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to get some of those.
Do it.
Washing machine of woes.
Okay.
Every week, I ask my Instagram community to give me their biggest ADHD woes, put them in a washing machine. Do you forget your washing in the washing machine?
Yes. And I'm sort of banned from... I'm not banned, but the trust is not there, because I put in like browns with blacks and something else the other day, and my partner was like, what is going on?
I've done that so many times. I hear my girlfriend shout, Alex, my t-shirt is no longer white.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't be trusted with white.
Gosh,
No.
I've got PTSD, you saying that, actually. It's quite a hostile conversation.
Hostile. That makes so much sense.
Right, so this week in the washing machine, someone said, RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, stops me from going for opportunities. It stops me asking for a promotion, setting boundaries with my partner, and generally just holds me back in so many areas. Any advice to overcome this, please?
That's something that, of course, is not uncommon. So I think whoever has written that, I just want to let you know, if you're listening to this, that you're not alone in that. And I think it's really important to understand that there's no shame in how you feel about this. But there are definitely things that you can do to help get yourself over that hurdle. Because I think what it sounds like to me is that the fear of the RSD is stopping you from doing it, not the actual RSD. We often have bad experiences, especially with rejection sensitivity, that is, 1,000 reasons why we shouldn't do something, just in case that same feeling comes up. So I think really working on clearing those limiting beliefs and just journaling about, what's coming up for you and what the real fear is to you, having these hurdles, and then that can often help to sort of rewrite the story. And I think if you can get yourself from a place of, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, to what if it actually won't happen, then that can help with those kind of things as well.
Super useful, really useful. Do you think there's also a connection between the RSD and the perfectionism? And the reason why many of us are such perfectionists is because we really deeply fear any feedback or criticism that might come about if what we do isn't perfect? Definitely.
And I think I still struggle with the feedback and the criticism. And I think even if, and again, I think it's to do with tonality too, because I can take criticism if it's fed back in a certain way. But if somebody is quite direct with their tone, like my partner can be quite direct, and we've had to work on that because I've been in tears, not because he's meant to offend me, but just because he said it as it is. So I think that comes into it as well. And then also, you're right, I think, we're so precious about the work that we do, because for us, we need a lot of praise in order to succeed, and we're very driven towards that. So I think that can make us feel, it's almost like somebody is shattering your dreams. It's so extreme how our brains work.
Definitely. I think it can feel like I think you said earlier, a punch in the stomach.
Oh my God, yeah.
Something so silly or small, like a friend saying they're too busy to see you. Feels like your world's ending.
Yeah. And I had to, that the friend thing, I think it doesn't affect me as much as it used to. But definitely the place that I've had to really work on my RSD is in business.
Have you got any advice for an entrepreneur who's starting a business? Because rejection, people saying no, is a huge part of business, and there's not really any getting around that. Do you have any tips for an entrepreneur for when they do encounter that in business?
So I think, there are techniques that you can do, like practical techniques. So grounding techniques are really good for that. So, if you do work from home and you're an entrepreneur and you receive RSD, then maybe just diverting your attention to something that makes you feel safe and grounded, or going to a location in your house that makes you feel safe and grounded. Breath work can really help. If you're feeling so triggered in the moment that you're literally like, oh my God, often just taking a moment and just taking some breaths, deep breaths, box breathing is a really good technique for that. If you can just take a moment to sort of rationalize your thoughts, because I can guarantee that when you come back down off the ceiling, it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. And then in terms of like actually managing RSD from a more holistic standpoint, I would definitely say that changing how I've looked at things has really helped. So instead of looking at something, a rejection, as, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, taking the pressure off myself and being like, it's not to do with me, it's them. It's not to do with me. There's going to be a better opportunity coming. This is just an opportunity for me, and looking at it as more of a blessing. But it's like layers upon layers, because first of all, you have to be in a position where you're calm and collected to handle the triggers.
Putting space between the trigger and your reaction as well, because like you said, you always, most of the time, you do calm down, and when you're able to look back at it in a more regulated state, you can really see that they didn't mean the harm that you thought that they did. And if you did say something when you were in that dysregulated state, you probably would have said something that you would have regretted later and caused yourself a lot of anxiety reliving it.
So this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I received a text message, and it was interesting because it sort of caught me off guard. It wasn't something I was expecting. I just automatically, I tried to control my emotion. I archived the message and I put my phone to the other side of the room, and I was like, right, respond to that when you're in more of a calm and clear headspace to do so. And like you said, old me would have just gone back with fire straight away. But I also think on that note too, that it's important to manage, process your emotions too, because I never want to say to somebody, oh, let's go toxic positivity, everything is an opportunity, because sometimes we do just get angry and upset, because that is a valid emotion. It's just for us, it's inflated 10,000. So the other day I really felt some RSD come up, so I went and punched my pillow. I went into my bedroom and I was like pounding the shit out of my pillow, and then I came back and it did actually help.
What was the trigger, if you don't mind me asking?
Ooh. So I've had to really work through this. I have so many amazing clients and I love all of them to pieces, but it's taken a while for that to get to that point. And as we know, in business, there will be encounters with people that we don't gel with and people that we do gel with. But I think when you're a business that's kind of your face on the brand, until you have a team of people, like I don't have a team of people around me at the moment. I don't have a HR department. I am my own HR department. So with that comes having to deal with conflict sometimes, getting people that owe you payments to, pay you. And, there are sometimes people that come into a service-based industry, like anything, it could be a restaurant, could be a coaching business like myself, but there will be customers that aren't necessarily pleasant. And it's quite tough sometimes to not take that personally, especially when you know that you pour your heart and soul into your business and you are connected to that. So I've had to work on kind of taking it, like the personal out of it, but it still catches you sometimes. And you're like, oh, especially because when you work with neurodivergent people, I have had experiences in the past where there has been, like we spoke about earlier with things, going all in very quickly. And then that feeds my impulsivity as well. And I'm like, oh my God, amazing, this person's going to be really great. And then when it turns out to be the different to that, I can get quite scorned by that. And I almost feel like it's a personal attack. So that was a similar scenario to what had happened the other day. And I had to kind of manage that.
Do you have any advice for a business person who has ADHD, who really has to stand their ground when someone is stepping all over them?
Yeah, definitely. So number one, just remember it's okay to be like that. You're not going to upset anybody. Often we think the opposite effect. We think that if we have authority, then people are going to hate us. And just remember that if you have to ask for money that somebody owes you, I think it's such a British thing in society where it's very hush around money, very hush around things like this. You know, you are genuinely doing a service and somebody owes you for the work that you have done. You are well within your right to ask that. And I think you don't have to be an arsehole to put a boundary in place and to assert authority. And I think, especially for neurodivergent females in business as well, I struggle with this and I have to like flip it on and off sometimes because I was so in my like masculine energy last year in my business, and I was very influenced by a lot of coaches in the space that were very like hustle, yeah, rah, like very aggressive. And then I realized that I actually like being a little bit more feminine in my business, and I think that's such an amazing thing to be able to do. But then I need to understand that it's okay to be authoritative as well and ask for my worth. You can just be direct and still polite. Remember that if you're asking something that somebody owes you, that's also valid. And just really work on the self-esteem to just realize, you know, what are you worth?
Yeah, totally agree. You don't need to be nasty. And actually, it's good for your self-confidence as well, because you can show yourself that you can set a boundary. Yeah. And actually, the person isn't going to be, they're going to respect you more. And you're going to pick up on that, which again is going to feed into your self-confidence. Exactly. What do you think makes ADHDers great entrepreneurs?
Definitely our diversity. We're so creative. It's absolutely amazing. And I think, you know, we're able to have our fingers in many pies at once, and we're able to spin a lot of plates at once as well. We're caring, we're compassionate, we are outside the box thinkers, we are able to create things and like create innovation that people potentially wouldn't be able to. And I think if you are a really passionate entrepreneur and you can get through the boundaries or the barriers that are in the way that you place on yourself, then you can actually be quite unstoppable.
Yeah, totally agree. I think impulsivity is often looked as a negative, but I actually think it's a positive.
It's
especially
such
in business.
A positive.
You have an idea, and there's a slight contradiction here with the perfectionism. But I think sometimes we have an idea and we just do it because we have to do it. We have that impulse.
Yeah.
We start something. It's fair enough. We might lose interest sometimes, but we're starters. We do stuff. And I think that actually sets us apart from a lot of neurotypicals who might overthink and be too afraid to start a business.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you're right about the contradiction between the perfectionism and then starting. And I think no matter where you are when you're starting something as an entrepreneur with ADHD, the perfectionism will haunt you at some point, especially when it's growing and you sort of see where it can go. You know, there will be certain points. So I think if you can like just stamp on the perfectionism and just think, you know, that will come. And especially when you've got more people on board, you can hire people to create perfectionism in your business.
Yes.
You know,
true, yeah. Once you've got the resources, then find the bits you challenge, 100%. That challenge you and delegate. Do you think shame is a big emotion within the ADHD community?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, you know, if you were to not mask and you were to be authentically you, I don't know where this fear comes in that we're not going to be accepted in society, because people day-to-day life is so caught up in their own lives that if you being the masking version of you and you being you as authentic, probably, unless you are a little bit eccentric, which a lot of ADHDers are, and we know when to tone that down, but I can't imagine somebody would really reject you unless they are not a nice person. So I think that the shame comes into it, especially I find that it happens now when I struggle with a lot of things in my business, especially when it comes to numbers, because I also struggle with dyslexia, and I find that I get embarrassed and I have shame around that and having to ask for help. I think sometimes the hyper-independence comes in, you're like, I should be able to do this myself.
I think there's a lot of stuff that actually helps us that we might be embarrassed to admit that it helps us. For example, I have this whiteboard on my desk that's this huge like color-coded magnet thing, and it looks really childish. But it without that, this podcast wouldn't be operational, because I need that for a visual calendar, for my guest bookings, all sorts of things. And I used to hold a great deal of shame associated with someone walking into my office and seeing that. But now I'm very proud about it.
Yeah.
Like all of the stuff that I've that I'm doing now would not be possible if it wasn't for that childish thing on my desk. And it completely removes the shame.
I think there's, as long as whatever takes you to get from A to B without forgetting things on the way, because I know that's something we struggle with quite a lot, I think that's great.
How do you personally take care of yourself when you're not working?
Previously, I had a very toxic relationship with exercise, as some people with ADHD do with food and other things, alcohol. That was something for me that I had to kind of, really work on my relationship with. So I would say now I enjoy going to the cinema. I like doing things that I can fully disconnect. I enjoy doing more sort of mindfulness stuff. So I really enjoy meditating now, and I never used to before, but I found an app that I really like using and I relate to the woman quite a lot. Yoga, having baths, watching Sex and the City, like just things like that really. Not anything, You
every
love a
night,
bath.
every night,
Yes.
without fail. It's an interesting question next, and I contemplate it sometimes myself. Do you ever wish that you didn't have ADHD?
Yes and no, because I like to look at the positive side of ADHD, and I never want to be like, oh, you wish you didn't have it, because I feel like it's become such an awareness around it. But of course, there are times where I really do wish that my brain worked in a different way and I was able to focus and I didn't get as burnt out as easily, because the way that my brain fires up, my body can't keep up with that sometimes, and I get very tired very easily. So I have to manage that within my business so well. I like to call myself like an egg, because I can like crack at any point, There has been definitely frustration there, and there's been situations throughout my teens and adulthood of things that I've done with ADHD that has caused sort of things that I'm not proud of.
What does that look like? What's something that you've done, for example, that you haven't been proud of?
Oh. We're getting deep. Oh my gosh. I'm totally transparent, and I think this is something that I think a lot of ADHDers should definitely, or neurodivergence I'm saying, because obviously I speak on behalf of everyone, but I think there's a lot of things that we do that are quite hush-hush. Like for me, throughout my life, I used to have like random impulse moments where I would like buy certain items in the shop and then not pay for others. And that would give me like a big dopamine hit to know that I could get caught. But then if I did get caught, I'd be like mortified. I was working with a psychotherapist last year, and he's fantastic. And he was the one that was like, Amie, it's okay. Like, this is normal behavior for somebody with ADHD. And that just made me feel so validated, because I felt like a naughty child.
The mini shoplifts is very relatable to me. It's those bloody reusable shopping bags that I always forget. I refuse to pay 10p for a new one, because I know I've got a cupboard in my kitchen full of them.
Yeah.
So I don't pay for it, and I get a huge little rush of dopamine as I walk out, knowing that I haven't paid for this 10p shopping bag.
Yeah.
Do you forget those reusable shopping bags?
All the time. All the time. That's why they're in the boot of our car now. Just a little bit more handy.
I actually heard someone do a little hack. They said when they're in the supermarket car park, they tell Google Maps to send them a notification every time they're in that location. So their phone pings when they drive into the supermarket car park, and then it says, grab a bag from your back seat.
That's intense.
Apparently
That's
it works.
great, yeah.
If only if you remember to take the bags from your kitchen to the car. Because that's the bit that I always fall short on.
Right.
So if anyone finds a solution to that, then do please send me a message.
Yeah, I can't say I've got any advice on that one.
Nick more bags.
Yeah, be in the newspaper for shoplifting more bags.
Who's misunderstood your ADHD in the past?
I would say that the memory that springs to mind for me is a childhood memory when I went to the dentist with my mum, and she was the one having the treatment done. And I remember being sat in the chair, and the dental nurse clearly did not like children. She was very cold. And I remember I was sort of swinging my legs and banging my leg on the side of the table. And she told me off on a number of occasions and got quite assertive with me. And looking back in hindsight, that was clearly because I couldn't keep still. And she didn't understand. She thought I was just being not very well behaved. So I'd say that's definitely a memory that stuck out for me. And just through my education as well, throughout, I was put in private education because they thought it was going to help me academically. And I didn't learn in the way that was deemed as, acceptable.
Do you have any really early memories of feeling different?
Yeah, so I went through quite a lot of separation anxiety when I was a kid. And if I couldn't see my parents anywhere or they were late picking me up, I would think the inevitable had happened. And I think that would result in me having meltdowns, like hysterically screaming meltdowns in the schoolyard. Whereas, I couldn't rationalize, oh, maybe they're just late. And, looking back, that was clearly not being able to regulate my emotions. So yeah, that was definitely something now looking back, I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Bit of a closing tradition on the podcast. I will ask all my guests what their most impulsive thing they've ever done is. What's your most impulsive thing?
Bought a puppy.
When did you buy a puppy?
Like 2 years ago.
How much of a gap was there between the idea and buying the puppy?
I went home to visit my parents. So me and my partner just got together. We were literally like 4 months into our relationship. I went home to Wales to visit my parents for my mum's birthday. And I came back with a dog. And my Jack was like, well, what the hell? Like he was like, who is this woman? She's just brought a dog back to London. Didn't have a garden. I was still PTing at the time, so I couldn't look after it. But I brought back a puppy to London. Yeah.
Very similar, very similar. I bought a puppy about, my sister put the idea into my head. Alex, you want to buy a dog? And then that evening I was on Gumtree looking at breeders. And the next day I was in the breeder's house and I chose one and I had to wait 2 weeks, which I was furious about. I had to wait 2 weeks till I could pick it up. I had to have its vaccinations.
Oh, really?
No, yes, they're very, 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 very relatable.
Because you've got a Frenchie, haven't you?
French Bulldog,
so that's what I bought.
You got a French Bulldog too?
Uh-huh.
Really?
I bought a French Bulldog puppy. Yeah, he's with my parents now.
Right.
So I kindly was like, guys, please. And now he's got a sister, so they bought another one.
What's his name?
His name is Max.
Max. Mine's Milo.
Oh,
yeah.
cute.
Milo and Max, go for a walk.
Yeah, dog walk, yeah. So unfortunately, Max is not with me right now.
Do you have any closing advice for people with ADHD, entrepreneurs wanting to start a business? Any closing advice you would like to give them?
I would definitely say that, number one, if you're listening to this podcast and you do have ADHD and you've thought about starting a business, that is for a reason. So don't let that thought go. I would explore that idea. I would say that if you can go into it, building up a very strong foundation for your boundaries and your self-care and all of the bits that I wish that I had, had a little bit stronger before I went into it, I would say that, that would be a really good starting point. I'd also say channel your impulsivity and, don't let the creative, like if people are saying to you, don't do something, don't take the advice because, how many crazy entrepreneurial people, amazingly crazy people have, not taken people's advice and they've got so far with their businesses. So I would say they're definitely the things that I would advise somebody. And it's okay to sort of reach out to people that are in the space as well to find out how they did things too.
Amazing. Incredibly useful. Thank you very much.
No
Thanks,
worries.
Amie.
Thank you so much for having me.